We did not know who the president was going to be. Obama won that year. He did take a platform that wasn't that outspoken about, medical or anything. We didn't know. We thought he'd be better than Bush. Bush was still going into California to raid in those places, which is why the model of caregivers spread the plants, let them be grown all over the state instead of a centralized dispensary or centralized grow that can be easily taken up by the feds. That was the model, and there you have the most unique of any of the programs created by the MPP of 72 plants, caregiver system, and no dispensaries. Now, with that being said, there's a lot of knowledge that needed to be passed around. The MMA attempted to serve that purpose by the creation of the compassion clubs and trying to have a kind of statewide resource where people could learn about it in more of a Tupperware local community kind of meet and greet. But then, of course, I don't know, maybe it's just because we're not in Russia and it's the United States. People wanted to turn into a business. We're not doing anything wrong. Where law means this, and and I'm not. And I think it's kind of foolish to think that even the police argument that you're not allowed to make money even under the MMA is absurd. That's. I'm not saying the idea a profit. There's scenarios that someone could be completely doing it for medical purposes and still earn money. I mean, it's just contrary to logic. But the dispensary thing was about the money, the shutdown of the money. The state wanted to take control of that. The cases, McQueen, as you mentioned, I think is hard to. They really work hard to get to that conclusion with this asymmetrical protection and whatnot. But it foreshadowed, and they even reference in there, maybe it's for the legislature to act here instead. But here, before we even get to the whole dispensary, let's back it up a little bit because, we had different leadership that effectuated this. I think, when Mike Cox was originally the Attorney General in 2008, 2009 through 10, and then Schuette won, I think everyone would have agreed that as much criticism as Mike Cox probably had, we'd have taken him for another 8 years instead of Bill Schuette anytime, But then Schuette comes in, and he, and we've talked about this, Tim. I feel like, you need a stacked Michigan, legislature. You had the, Attorney General. There's very little, very aligned political party. There's not a lot of pro-police, not a lot of pro-cannabis representation within the community at the time, and there's a lot of bills that were introduced 2010, 2011 that were intended to derail the MMA. And they went all out. And there was protests in the Capitol, and they were trying to, it was really, and they were all introduced by Bill Schuette. I remember him standing in the, with the law enforcement community. I think that the Dow had dropped thousands of points that day, and he was consumed with 24 bills he introduced to try to amend the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, which is insane. His total bias as the paid gun opposing it now was rearing its ugliness in the Attorney General. What let's try to remember some of those people that were involved in it. I mean, CPU comes to mind. They were very active in that. But you have the Walsh bills. I remember Horn was on that Judiciary Committee. You had
one of the first was Rick Jones. And he did this marijuana bar thing. It was some convoluted sort of thing. Well, what does it define up here? Because he had some terrible experience or whatever. He investigated some guy that they were on motorcycles and they were supposed to be medical patients and did it's horrible. This is a joke and and so he kind of that got his attention. So he was the first agitator, when it came to that whole thing, and that's why a lot of people don't like the guy, And but he that brought him out, and then finally there was this cry for this Walsh bills, but again, see, the angle was being worked with Mike Calton was a critical player, back then. Because he was the first legislator to come out of the closet and just say, yeah, okay, I'll take your money. All right, and we'll do it. I'll get this thing going, and people just the money was just flowing to Carlton's pocket, into Carlton's pocket.
That is one of the greatest. It's so sad.
hilarious.
And then I heard that they do,
Oh, we're live.
I know, whatever. But they do
We're
a lot of
live.
that stuff.
Hey.
Improv.
Yeah, we're live. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
Sorry, we had a
Technical
technical difficulty with a roll of tape hitting.
Tape and an explosion.
It was
Apparently.
bad.
Holy.
It was bad. But we're
Paul
back.
Williams was right.
Oh boy.
All right, so we were talking about this point in time with the shooting bills and the implementation. And, you know, I remember a specific time in this history when the Cole memos began to come out of the Obama started to say when they were not going to, and that really I thought was the difference. I think there was a certain point in time, there was always this fear of the federal government. It was 2010, the first one came
Yeah.
out of Obama position, and then that kind of set off the explosion of the dispensaries, and you had that Green Mile in Lansing, we had like hundreds of them, and then Shooty was just appalled by it. And there's people were advertising the radio.
Yeah.
It just became a little bit out of control. So
Yeah.
the bills started getting implemented, and then we had the real war, and
Yeah.
then the McQueen case came down. But what would you say, like pulling back? I mean, I know you keep track and kind of you give an opinion on some of the cases that they've played out.
Yeah.
If you were to give a grade to the various offices of public officials that had some influences on that, we started with the Attorney General, let's say Bill Schuette. That's an easy one. If you give him a grade of how would you say his role, and first of all, how important do you think that role is, and in considering that, what grade would you give him?
I would say a D. Simply
That high, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty generous.
simply because he wanted to be governor, and that gave him visibility. It gave him credibility with persons in the party that hate marijuana. That was part of the deal with the whole thing. He's basically, as I can see from a distance, he's totally a political creature. That's really as best as I could define it. And so where the Walsh bills came up is somebody finally said, we're desperate. What is the Attorney General? Please just tell us what to do. Well, here we want to know. Well, anyway, so a series was bills. Bill Schuette can't introduce a bill. It has to be some other legislator. And it turned out it was this John Walsh and some others, and these were really harsh. I mean, draconian, kinds of stuff. And so there's some other people that there was this Cannabis Patients United CPU was founded, Dave Brogren was a key player. Jamie Lowell was involved in the group. Ryan Basor. Myself for a time, and Craig Canterbury. But these were really intellectual giants. And there was another guy. Oh God, that's terrible. He was an attorney that was all Tim Knowlton. They took on the whole work of all going to all the hearings and negotiating behind closed doors or whatever with the other side. And it went on for a long, long time. And finally, there was what was produced, the Walsh bills. But it didn't happen overnight. And it was really CPU that was, on our side, that was most responsible for that.
It neutralized them a lot.
Yes,
really
yes,
neutralized
it did.
them.
And it could have been a lot worse. I mean, and some people didn't support it. I thought it was a good idea because what you want is the legislature weighing in and at least owing something. Now, okay, here's your creation. There you go.
Right.
So now they're bought into it.
Right. The argument, Tim, just to carry on with it, would be they did not repeal the caregiver system, and by not doing that, they have given its blessing. Right.
Yeah.
In other words, they the way the marijuana is going to be grown is still remain. They didn't repeal that and create a new way. The way it's being sold didn't change that. What they did is they messed with the bona fide doctor-patient relationship. They came with an outdoor grow definition. There was they removed that 7A from the Section 8, so they tried to make the more expansive defense for Section 8.
Well, and
include
there's
more
that
people.
other goofball thing about transportation. That
That was the second. No, I agree. That was ridiculous. That was ridiculous. It's not even in the Medical Marijuana Act. It's in the penal code, right? And But anyways, so So I think, and we've talked about this. I think that Schuette went at this in a very, very inappropriate way. He was the attorney general. He trying to introduce legislation, and I think like a lot of it got shot down. I don't want to, the CPU had a huge impact in terms of neutralizing what was, but all in all, they did not. It was not nearly as bad as it could have been.
The other thing, they had to get that 3/4 supermajority. That was the firewall, really. That otherwise, if we didn't have that 3/4, it probably would have been much harsher.
But wasn't that done with a voice vote? I mean, they didn't actually have the 3/4 in reality.
No, they went on record.
Yeah, they did.
They
were talking 2000.
We were there. I mean, we were scared. We didn't know what was going to happen.
We're talking. Let's talk about it because there was the 2012. That's what we're talking about. Amendments for 2012, which they, it came out in April 2013, I believe. And then there's a new amendments that came out like in 15, and then the final amendments of 2016, which was retroactive, that went backwards, in terms to change the.
Yeah.
So
well, the drama about that whole vote, if you remember, we went to bed thinking the bills weren't going to make it through, and at the last minute, Virgil Smith, worked a deal with Jones, and bam, they passed it like around 4 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
At 4 a.m. in the morning.
In the
we
lame
woke
duck.
Up, yes, in lame duck.
Yep.
Lame duck.
Woke up to the news.
And we woke up, there it was.
And we've learned that there is no politicking that goes on until lame duck. That these are a bunch of scaredy cat legislators.
That knife cuts both ways.
Right, because then the next session,
yeah.
there's the promise that the original bills of the dispensary were going to get voted on. Right, everyone had remember that whole thing in 2000. What was it? 14.
14.
And went to 2016, and then finally,
First they killed the dispensary bill, and then they killed 5104, which was the first
NPRA and other efforts, and
it was all due to reportedly just law enforcement that.
Mike Bouchard was the mastermind. He is considered the mastermind of that. He's actually, I met him a couple times. I had even had a group lunch, with the man, and he's crafty. Let's put it that way, and knows how to, get things done.
Yeah, he knows how to motivate people.
And he called up all these cops, and because he was headed at some sheriff's association, National Sheriff's Association at one time. He's that powerful. So he called up these police chiefs to spread the word, and each police chief called up. Out in Oakland County? Are you kidding? Out up north? No. So that's what happened.
All right, moving around the board, we've got the two. Between the 2008 and up until now, we get the legislature and different players. Anyone stand out as a, forget positive or negative, but just was an important player. Someone that was good champion for it or good champion against it. Obviously, I know you defer to Rick Jones. He's a major player, and I know you give a lot of respect for him, and probably think he's come around a lot. I think you probably think on this issue from an old warrior, cop warrior.
Yeah. The thing with Jones, I like Jones. He is the opposite of Bill Schuette. Jones is gregarious. Jones is real.
Yeah.
He tells jokes, and he really believes his jokes.
Yeah, are funny, right.
And genuine, very, very genuine individual. And for some, he's horrible to work with. Others, if you like that style, which I find I like it. And so we kind of have this little
all right, but here's the thing, because
relationship,
he's evolved on this issue, unlike Schuette.
He has, yes. Oh, yeah.
He's more akin to what the public wants. Then it's like a political, elite, kind of like philosophical, just never bending, like an abortion, like the abortion group. You know what I mean? Like it's
sure.